Hi everyone. Welcome back to a brand new Vectra AI podcast. Today we have Tejas from our SE team joining us today to answer some frequently asked questions our team gets about the Vectra AI platform with the Respond UX, or RUX for short. So welcome, Tejas. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yep, thanks, Noel.
Perfect. So we'll get right into it. So first, we just want to introduce RUX for those unfamiliar with it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So Respond UX is Vectra's SaaS experience. So what this is going to do, especially for customers who are more used to our quadrant UX, is it's going to represent increased prioritization. There's a focus around entities, or anything that's IP addressable like a host or a user that's present on-prem or in different cloud environments. It's also going to allow you to drill into the metadata directly into the UI for customers who've used the quadrant experience and have used recall, for example, that's in a separate interface, but Respond puts that all into the one UI and allows you to actually access that metadata in different ways, common queries, and what we call instant investigation, and then also the larger data set to dig through network and different cloud metadata as well. And it really brings this experience for Vectra into a single place. And for customers who have multiple deployments, even allows you to get a view across all of those at once.
Perfect. Yeah. So just to echo your sentiments here, we basically, you know, find the most advanced attack regardless of where they are, network, cloud, identity, etc., in one single user experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with the goal of Vectra to really bring it all together, single attack signal, that is really accomplished by RUX.
Perfect. So with that, we are going to talk about some of the questions that we often get. So the first is, if you're a current customer, how much time does it take to migrate to RUX?
Sure. So when we're actually talking about migrating to RUX, we want to make sure that the customer is comfortable with what they need to do. So there's some firewall rules that need to be put into place. We'll make sure that the customer is aware of that. There's documentation that we'll provide. We'll also do a preliminary check to make sure that they are cleared to do the migration. And then once it's actually scheduled, this is all done through Vectra support, but once it's scheduled, then it takes anywhere usually from 45 minutes to 2 hours for the actual system upgrade to happen. What that will depend upon is how large the customer is. So when you're talking about customers that have large amounts of users and machines that we're monitoring, high amounts of throughput, larger deployments, those tend to be the ones that take longer. Whereas smaller deployments, tend to be, towards more of the 45-minute mark. But that is really the system upgrade portion. When people talk about migration and actually getting it ready for their SOC process, that's a different story. So that can actually vary. And that's something that, we'll have the conversations with the customer on exactly what we're trying to do, right? With some people who migrate to RUX, they may be doing an expansion, right? They may be taking advantage of some of the newer features with Vectra, things like, CDR for M365, ITDR for Azure AD, CDR for AWS, CDR for Azure, right? In which case, those will need to be deployed and implemented, and also integrations with different tools like SOAR and SIM, single sign-on. All of that will also need to be integrated as well. So that is also, additional migration, if you want to think about it that way. But
Yeah,
as far as just getting them moved, generally 45 minutes to 2 hours.
perfect. And you kind of touched on this, the second question here around downtime, but in general, it sounds like it shouldn't take more than a day for most, customers.
Yeah, exactly. So the downtime is really the upgrade window, and we'll make sure we're scheduling this in a way that, whatever that downtime happens, you're not, you know, it's not during a time where you would actually be using Vectra, quite a lot, right?
Yeah.
And once it's actually done, you'll get an invite sent to the customer point of contact, and they'll be able to log in for the first time, and then additional access can be provided to other people. and that's all an automatic process. But yeah, just really during that window of the upgrade is when it would be down, but generally very quick.
Perfect. So we'll jump into the next question here, which is what are the steps required after the actual conversion of the brain or, to get RUX up and running? And again, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but can you elaborate?
Yeah, sure. So once it's actually up and running, so as I mentioned, there'll be an invite that's sent to the customer point of contact that's designated by generally, the SE, somebody like me, when we're actually putting in the steps to get this done. So that person will get it and they'll be able to log in. And then ideally we'll have the conversations about what needs to be done before we actually go into deploying RUX. We want to make sure we're ready for anything. But this is the point where we'll talk about if there are additional things that we need to deploy, right? So if there are additional sensors, if we're doing an expansion, we want to make sure that those are deployed. We want to make sure that the customer understands how that needs to be done. And also for integrations, right? So, some integrations, like EDR that are native to the platform, could pass through. But then there are other ones that are going to be dependent upon the actual alerting. And the alerting does change with Respond UX, does improve, but there's also a bit of a format change. So when you're coming to look at integrations with SOAR or SIM, there's going to be different integrations into those tools, right? So that could mean a separate API-based integration for a SOAR tool, or it could mean setting up the actual SIM connector for the SIM connection for something else, right? So all this stuff is stuff that needs to be done, stuff that will be discussed with the customer. And one thing that we always want to make sure that we do is, before we even do the upgrade, we want to make sure we meet them and to make sure we understand this, but also once it's also upgraded, we want to make sure that we have a meeting so that we can, make sure that the customer understands just where everything is, what additional integrations need to be done, if we're adding anything, and just make sure that they're comfortable with that. But we always make sure that this is done very smoothly. Everything is very well documented, and we're all very familiar with what needs to be done for whatever path that the customer's looking to take.
Yep, exactly. I mean, we have a very large, ecosystem of technology partners, so we're very familiar with, all of the leading vendors for SIM, SOAR, EDR, et cetera, to make it as seamless as possible. So thank you for, calling that out. Um, and our last question is really, what should SOC teams be aware of when migrating to RUX? Is there anything else that from your experience with our current install base, come up?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, what's very important with Vectra is that we're integrating into the SOC process and that we understand what that is. If that changes when we introduce Respond UX because of additional integration points or new modules, or in the case of something like single sign-on and how people actually access the platform, we want to make sure all of that's understood. Right. So we'll have those conversations beforehand. As I mentioned, everything's very well documented for whatever we're trying to do. But we want to make sure that the SOC is comfortable. So we want to make sure we're also meeting with the SOC beforehand so that they can see it. Right. What's really good to do before we even do any kind of migration, if they haven't seen Respond, is always to have something to show them, right? So they can understand and ask any questions that they have about how things are going to change. And also, once the actual upgrade is done, making sure that the SOC is also aware, right? We'll go through and we'll make sure, I'll do some, initial training for the SOC teams as well, just to make sure that they know how to use the tool. And really, once all of that is done, it's making sure that they're comfortable with anything.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. I mean, we're not a, set it and forget it kind of
Yeah.
solution. To your point, we're very well documented with, your team, the SE team, and we also have our customer success team and our professional
Mhm.
services team. So we really, want to partner with our customers on RUX so they can get the most value out of it. So good call out there.
Yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely. Absolutely. And for a lot of our customers utilize our MDR services as well.
Yeah.
They'll be able to see, the integration between MDR and then the Respond UX experience as well.
Yep. Exactly. Perfect. Alrighty. So, with that, that concludes today's podcast. As always, you can subscribe to the Vectra AI YouTube channel to check out all of our podcasts. Thank you all for listening, and thank you, Tejas, for your time today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole.